Good morning. We are on our second meditation here for the Holy Week. And yesterday I was talking about the faith or the lack of faith that was seen in Israel right before the end, and how it's belief and unbelief that really is behind what we do. And in fact, you can easily see what people truly believe by what they do. Well, today I wanted to take another scripture in mind, and it's in Luke chapter 21, and it's also in that week right before Jesus was crucified. So in Luke 21, we read this. And he looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the treasury, and he saw also a poor widow putting in 2 mites. And he said, Truly, I say to you that this poor widow has put in more than all. For all of them out of their abundance have put in offerings for God, but she out of her poverty put in all the livelihood that she had. And then some spoke of the temple, how it was adorned and how beautiful the stones and donations. And he said, These things which you see, the days will come in which not one stone shall be left upon another that will be thrown down. And so that was Luke chapter 21, verses 1 to 6. Now, I find that really interesting how those two stories are linked together in the gospel. They seem almost as if they are two completely separate things, and perhaps they were. Honestly, in Matthew's gospel, they talk about that happening on the Mount of Olives. So, there may have been a big day and there would have been time between the two events, but in Luke's gospel, it's fascinating that the two are linked together because they really are, in a way. You're talking about Jesus who is noticing something very special and wonderful with this widow. She is here in the midst of all of these others, giving something that was very meaningful, very precious, and very important to her. It was all that she had, he says. Those 2 mites, and he gives it in the temple, while all of the others are giving so much more. And Jesus points her out amongst all of them and says, hey, she is the one that truly gave, in spite of all of the magnificent and lavish gifts that the others were giving. God saw that there was one gift that truly mattered. And then the disciples are looking at the temple and they're amazed by it. And, historians, notably Josephus, tells us that the temple was one of the wonders of the world. It was amazing and it was just incredible to see. And so, of course, they were looking at it. It was Passover week and they were amazed at the structures and the beauty of it. And Jesus says, hey, wait a second. Don't be so amazed by this because in a very short amount of time, it's going to be destroyed. And we know that his prophecy was realized word for word in AD 70. In fact, today you can go to Jerusalem and you can still see that there is no temple, but a few stones that have been there, and there's just one wall. And so it's interesting because in both instances, he's saying, hey, don't look at the big thing. Don't look at that big, beautiful building or that big, beautiful project or those big, incredible, lavish works that draws everybody's attention. That's not what really matters. And it's true to think about it in this term. Here we are 2,000 years later, still talking about how amazing and how wonderful and how beautiful and how inspiring that woman's gift was, rather than the actual building of the second temple. In one way, at least as a spiritual value goes, you can almost say that her gift and the spiritual implications have outlasted the temple. Of course, in a much other way, you couldn't, because Jesus walked in that temple. Because when you think about how it was built in the time of Ezra and also in Haggai and Zechariah, it is a fascinating thing, though, that the woman's gift is still there. And in fact, that tells me how Jesus sees things. It's almost as if Jesus is saying, hey, don't look at that big temple. Let's remember, destroy this temple, he said, and in 3 days I will rebuild it. Speaking of the temple of his own body. That's a temple that we should actually be looking at, isn't it? That's more of what is necessary, what's needful. And so during this week, I think that it's a good meditation for us. What is truly needful? Maybe it's not the big thing that we might have our eyes on, that we're most impressed about. It's not necessarily the big thing that everybody else is looking at. When the Lord is looking at those two mites, something given with our heart, something done with a pure and devoted love towards Him. So I hope you have a wonderful day and do meditate on these words.